over there, so they may be able to contain a lot of this on their own. But I would like, so I want to have some flexibility there, but I'd like to know that we're talking with the country club as well to encourage them to obviously adopt the best standards consistent with their need to protect their investment. So that's all I had.
Should that be in the ordinance, Keith? Should that be covered in the ordinance as well if we have different standard for a golf course?
Well, I think to the extent that the exemption exists, that's in there. So we already.
That's it. That's all we need.
To do that, I think the way it's drafted is probably appropriate.
Okay. All right, thank you.
So the question that I have, the Loxahatchee River Pollutant Reduction Plan, well, who's the authority on that?
Well, I'll give it the first shot. Bob can fix it. I think it was, this entity was created at the request of FDEP or some of the major players such as Jupiter and maybe the Loxahatchee River River District went to DEP and said, let us deal with it locally. I'm not really sure, but it's got to be one of the bigger players or FDEP did it themselves, because I can remember they were regularly reporting, problems with the pollutants, including nitrogen and phosphorus being at over the limit levels, and something had to be done. So I think it's one of those two, the big players or FDEP.
And have they ever sent a letter to the village of Tequesta requesting this type of a ordinance examination or changes to our current ordinance?
Not that I know of. Tequesta was, I'll just say, remiss for a long period of time in not having regular attendance with this body. There was some sporadic attendance, but my understanding, and particularly with Jupiter, that they have taken major steps to do and or to implement or to try testing of ways to reduce outfall to the river or the pollutants in the outfall, to look at for large-scale implementation. We really haven't done that much, I mean, the Dover ditch is a problem, for example, and now we got sea level rise and on top of all that, but we really need to just get more involved regardless of what you do with this ordinance, just so we know what's going on in our backyard, and we do our part to make sure FDEP doesn't come down with us with a hammer on our head and cause projects and costs that nobody wants.
One last question. Education. Obviously, we can pass an ordinance, but many of the people that are impacting the river are private homeowners. So not only in Tequesta, but in Jupiter and other places, they've got to be educated on what the requirements are and what's expected. I'm presuming that there will be some money involved in making that effort. I'm just curious as to what extent have those efforts actually already begun in Jupiter or in Martin County? Has there been a clear and focused education effort to make sure that people understand what the ordinance requires and then hopefully are complying with what's being asked of them?
Truthfully, I don't know. Like I said, we can use our newsletter. I would love to create some sort of a web presence where we can either shoot out email blasts or people can find information on a certain spot on the village's website. But I don't know what Martin County's done. And, I would think that our representative, I think it's Matt Hammond, our representative on that stakeholder board, he could inquire if they've done anything, and if they haven't, if they would do that to help us simultaneously address the problem.
Yeah, and if they've done some good work there, it'd be nice to share it so that we don't have to reinvent the wheel either.
Yes, that's right.
Okay.
Has the Florida DEP ever sent us any?
If I may chime in.
Yes, go ahead.
Go ahead, Bob.
Go ahead.
Yep. Mr. Shaw, go ahead.
I just want to answer that question a little bit more. I can speak to the town of Jupiter when their revised fertilizer ordinance I know they publicized it via, their town website and social media, but they also reached out to local retailers, and they had an agreement with Home Depot to post a sign in their fertilizer department about the fertilizer ban. They can't stop anyone from buying fertilizer, but it was an informational sign telling you that in the town of Jupiter, this is the period you should not be applying fertilizer. And I know in Martin County, there's been a lot of press about it. I have an article from TC Palm, which was from last year, which documented, are these bans successful? And there's a quote from Martin County saying it's removed nitrogen from their Indian River Lagoon. Brevard County, that's not that close, but they cited that it's working there. So there has been a lot of, I believe there's been a lot of outreach in these communities that have passed these revised ordinances.
So has the Florida DEP, have they actually sent us a letter or anything stating that there is concern at all with us?
Well,
Go ahead, Bob.
right now,
Go ahead.
I have the Loxahatchee River pollutant reduction plan here in front of me, and, the Northwest Fork and the Southwest Fork have been determined to be impaired by chlorophyll, and chlorophyll is a result of nitrogen and phosphorus being dumped in there. So we have a problem. The FDEP is allowing us local stakeholders to address it on our own by this plan we've been citing. And if we augment and improve our fertilizer ordinance, that will certainly cement, improvements that we, may bode well for us, that we won't have FDEP breathing down our neck. But I think in the attachments, back up for tonight's meeting, there was also my letter to Julie Esty back and forth, and I read what she spoke to me about. They would feel that it would be a great improvement and addition to the reduction plan, but she's also said they want to follow up with us to see if the council approves the ordinance to include any update to the plan. So they haven't reached out to us. We're sort of, through this committee of local communities, we have sort of been the one stakeholder that hasn't done as much as others, and so they've been waiting for us to step up, in my opinion.
So the implication is they've given the local entities a chance to address this themselves. Should they not do so, they're going to do it on our behalf, and they'll do it at a higher level, at the state level, and do it forcefully. So I think obviously we want to take advantage of the opportunity to do it ourselves.
Mr. Stone, if I may. So when this group,
Right.
I was probably working for the town at the time, but when this group was created, it would be highly unusual if someone failed to write to the village. And I do remember seeing, there's this point in time every year when the clerk or the manager here will add a list of the agencies and seek out who's going to go to what.
Mm-hmm.
And this group was on there, at least in the, last 5, 6, 7 years. So somewhere along the line, they made contact. I just don't know who or when, to be specific.
Right.
And this ban's supposed to prevent algae bloom or the killing of the grass on the sand of the river? What is the damage?
They are related. I mean, if you have an algal bloom, obviously worst case scenario, you would have a toxic algae bloom, which we're all too familiar with around here. But algae growth on the surface can also shade seagrass on the bottom of the river and not allow it to have enough sunlight. It would kill it off. So there's a number of ways that it can be deleterious to our river.
So from experience, I've noticed that the seagrass gets killed whenever there is a large rain, and the brackish water stays brackish for a couple weeks. And maybe that's due to the fertilization, maybe that's due to just all the amount of water. It takes a while for that ocean to come in and clean it out. How do we impact that? I mean, because the grass is, I think, the most important aspect for the grass side of things. On the algae blooms, I think this year, I don't think we had one. And as significant as we've had in the previous history, due to some major changes that Brian Mast put into place, or through his efforts on the distribution of Lake Okeechobee. I'm just wanting to try to get a really good understanding before we just start making just a bunch of changes. I'm not
Well,
opposed to it, I'm just,
Big picture, I would say that the primary problem is a lack of freshwater flow from the hinterlands. And that's why the county and the South Florida Water Management District are trying, and I think it's kind of questionable to do so, but they're trying to take Lake Okeechobee water that is currently diverted to the water catchment area, which is the city of West Palm Beach's
Right.
property, and diverting it up the Loxahatchee Slough to the, what do they call it, the creeks and branches and so on that feed the Loxahatchee River. So the fresh water flow will increase, and theoretically, that would help the grasses and the environment in general. I say it, I'm wondering if it's doubtful, because the water in Lake Okeechobee is so dirty, I don't know if
Yeah.
it's the wise thing to do, but definitely
Over
fresh
time.
water flow is definitely needed.
right. Probably more than this.
Maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I would add that, as far as large rain events, storm events, siltation, is a problem. I know we're not, it's more of a problem in the inlet, but when the C-18 discharges, millions and millions of gallons of water a day, that's not gonna help the seagrass in the inlet for sure. But, I guess, I want to go back to, the DEP's telling us that the Loxahatchee Rivers get some pollution problems, and they've identified that it's a nutrient problem, nitrogen and phosphorus, and we have to address it. We also met with, and I'm sure maybe you've seen that in the backup document, we met with Bud Howard from the Loxahatchee River District, and he was very happy to see that we were addressing this issue.
And I guess
I don't think,
I was going to say, in his quote, he basically said, and the short answer is yes, it does have an improvement. And I'm not trying to change that at all. I'm just trying to get us a good understanding of how big or of an impact this is going to make. And it doesn't sound like it's going to have a major impact other than,
Well, it
just
should,
doing.
it should reduce nitrogen and phosphorus levels over time, particularly as Mr. DeAmber said, that if our other jurisdictions get into the ballgame. But it's not the one and only big-time solution to the problem. There's multitudes of, like salt water, septic tank leaching, all these different things are causing the problem, but this is one of the major ones on the list, definitely. So you just kind of like bite off what you can at the time and just keep working over time to make it better.
Yeah, and that's a good point. I mean, you may have multiple contributing factors, but this is one we can certainly address and should address. And then we can go back and look at what can be done with some of the other issues, so.
Okay.
And I'm in favor of moving it forward.
Yeah.
Our waterways obviously have a lot of issues, but I think, in my opinion, it's a small portion of it. But for all of our natural environment areas, I think they can use any help that they can get, because in long term, hopefully it'll add up and contribute greatly. I don't think, which the EEC is not asking for, it's not asking residents to not use fertilizer, just to use it in a more smarter method. Pay attention to what you're using. If you use a company like Mr. Bradford does, pay attention to what they're charging for, what they're using, when they're using it, and just be more mindful. That's pretty much how I take it, right?
Yep, you're right.
The only thing
if I may just jump in on what Laurie said about fertilization, you still, if you want to maintain a good, healthy lawn, turf, most people still would want to fertilize it. The experts say you should be fertilizing in these bridge seasons, outside of the rainy summer, late fall, early spring. You don't want to fertilize in the winter because your grass is dormant and the roots won't absorb it. But there are times that you can and should, if you want that perfect lawn, you still can fertilize. And that's an education thing.
It is, that's the other part for me is this is just a small step, I think, for leaders to take. At the end of the day, it's the users that are either gonna use it or not. Everyone can still go out and use it and not follow the rules, but if they get educated and inspired to wanna do better for what surrounds us, then hopefully that'll take in the end of the day.
Yeah, the only thing I'd like to say, just make sure that Tequesta Country Club is aware of this, and that we reach out to them and let them know and show them this ordinance, so that they can come for part of that discussion on the first reading. And then also, it'd be nice to have someone like True Green or someone that is a local contractor in the area that provides that fertilizing service to be aware of it, to hear their insight too, just from a different perspective.
You just brought up another point. Mr. Bradford, can you just clarify in that draft where it talks about having the license or expertise on what they're doing? Because what they have, the EEC has dug up is companies will be certified, the owner will be certified.
To get business
And then they
license.
do training, but doesn't mean that maybe they're doing the training correctly. So they've been trying to figure out how can Tequesta be smarter about who is in Tequesta applying things? Are we holding them accountable, right? That's what you guys were going for?
Well, we would like to have the backstop be with the building department, that they say to these companies, do you have your documents to show and that you got this training, or do you at least have one person on staff, whatever the rule says. And then if they show, then they get their business, I can't think of the new name, their business license to operate now. It's just a way to sort of funnel the flow of these people and to make sure they're doing it, you know. I don't doubt that they're doing it. It was a big deal in the industry when all of this first started, probably 6-7 years ago. And but to answer your question, it looks to me like the training and licensing is on sections 9 and 10 on page 12.
And Jose, just to clarify, when we have construction workers come in and, let's say, building houses or doing whatever, they are supposed to be licensed when they do work, correct?
Correct, yes.
Okay, so for me, I would expect anyone that's coming in and applying a chemical of any sort should be licensed or certified to some degree. Is that what we're going for, Mr. Bradford?
Yeah, and let's take the example of landscapers. There's not very many landscapers who get their business license from Tequesta. We learned that on the committee early on. So we're not going to probably have a big influx of landscapers and fertilizer companies coming knocking on our door. But over time, if we start, you know, educating and informing our citizens, they're going to do things like I did. They're going to look at that bill, see, what did you put on here? You know, I remember reading in the smoke signals that can't be in here during summertime. And so things will gradually, organically become better over time. I mean, you know, your code enforcement officer, he would be swamped if he tried to ride around and enforce everything. I'd be happy to ride with him and show him a lot of stuff, but there's so much stuff that's out there that needs fixing. It's hopeless. So I think the best way is just information, education, and it organically will happen over time.
Yeah, I mean, I have to get a securities license to operate here, as a business owner, so I totally get that side of getting the license, but also, you bring up a good point, that business has to be located in the village of Tequesta to go through and get that business license
Right.
to be able
Yes,
to
all I know
verify.
off the top of my head would be Nozzle Nolan on Old Dixie.
If they're doing their fertilizer there,
Yeah, they do,
Yeah.
yeah. But they probably have a corporate, they have a business license there too, right?
I'd like to see this go forward. We are surrounded by water.
Yeah.
We have to get out in front of this. We don't want to wait until we do have alga blooms. It is like you're saying, and I have been to those meetings before. I was not the representative, but I have been to the meetings with the Waxahachie River District. There are areas, as you're saying, that are looking to be polluted now. It is the wild and scenic river, one of, I think, what, 9 in the entire?
Only one in Florida, too, I think.
Right. And so I think that it's important to do this. I don't like overregulation, but we also see a lot of people just don't know what they're doing. They're not doing this to hurt the ecology. They're not doing this to poison the river. But just like overwatering, we find, people want their lawns to look good, and so therefore, they're not really paying attention. And I
That's
think
right.
if we can bring it to their attention how important this is. And I think that you both have done an excellent job in laying this out for us. So I would like to support this as we move forward into a meeting.
Well, thank you, and the pro here on ordinances
Obviously.
needs to scrub in legal formation of it.
Of course, of course. Is there any other
No,
conversation?
just thank you to you both.
Yes,
You're welcome.
all right.
I think this is why we created this group, right?
Yep. Yes, excellent, excellent work. Thank you. All right, item 2 is the discussion ordinance of 6-20, which is signage and permits for temporary signs. And before we get started again, as we have over and over, and this is something that's very important, I think what I would like to hear from Jeremy is the pros and the cons of doing certain signs, because there are some pitfalls and there are some things that might be beneficial. But I want to hear about, again, and Keith has talked to us about this, about when you open something up, then you open it up for everything and everyone when it comes to signage. So can you talk to us about that, Jeremy?
Yeah, I mean, I'll talk a little bit about it. Amy's here, so she'll probably want to talk too. I don't know if you can see her, so I just wanted to point out that she was here.
Yeah,
But, you know, I guess a big part of the signage that you're gonna have issues with is it aesthetically pleasing? You gotta do it for everybody. So, I mean, if you have a, shopping mall that has, 10 shops in it, and you could have all 10 of those signs out in the right of way, so you start talking about the aesthetics. But as we pointed out in the past few meetings that we talked about signage was, the regulation of freedom of speech and being able to regulate those types of signs. I know that in past meetings, we've talked about, having a cookie cutter sign for everybody. We've talked about, a signed permit to allow them in the right of way for like a special event. We also talked a little bit about conversation with the A-frame signs and where they are allowed. Currently, our ordinance only allows for them to be 5 feet from their building, so maybe there's something with the A-frame sign that you can allow them to extend out further, but just still not in the right of way. You will. I don't think you'll find a municipality that allows temporary signs in the right of way. I mean, it's just not something that they allow, partly for those reasons that I just discussed. I mean, obviously, you have the benefits of helping the businesses, open, point them in the right direction, but there's some drawbacks with aesthetics and, even some of the legalities with, regulating what they say. And so, I don't know if that answered your question. Maybe that starts the conversation a little bit for this. But, I haven't been able to find municipalities that, and I, of course, haven't looked at every one of them that allow temporary signs in the right of way. What you do, maybe a little bit, you could do something different on their property, like the A-frame signs, and adding some more flexibility to that. I know Good Shepherd, I met with them. That was one of the things that they wanted to see. Their building faces away from the street, so a 5 foot from the entrance of their building wouldn't really help them at all. So they were wanting some more flexibility with that. Obviously, my recommendation is, keep them out of the right of way, but I know there's conversation because of COVID and helping the businesses and, get them up and going again. Although all businesses are allowed to be open now, so it's not about, well, this business, like it was at the beginning of COVID, some businesses were allowed to be open, some weren't. All businesses are allowed to be open, and the governor's actually made it has prevented local municipalities from passing anything or shutting down businesses because of COVID-related occupancy. So Mayor, I hope that helped, but I'm open to questions, and Keith can help a little bit too, but, I know even talking with Jose, I mean, we're open to whatever you guys, the council, wants to do with temporary signage. We just want to make sure it's a uniform, ordinance or policy that we can enforce for everybody, and that's what they've done a good job, Jose and Michael, of, they see a sign, they pull a sign. I mean, and we're doing a better job of, notifying the homeowners if we pull a sign from their right of way in front of their house, and let them know that we took it, but, they've done a good job of enforcing the ordinance as it reads now.
Okay, thank you. Do we want, Amy, why don't you just, if you want to just say a few words, maybe now would be a good time before council starts to discuss this.
Yes.
Well, as you know, we get 3 minutes for you.
You want just 3 minutes?
Yep.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Happy, what day is this?
Holidays.
Yeah, Monday,
Is it still Monday?
November.
Happy holidays.
I hope you guys all had a great Thanksgiving. I was under the understanding this was a workshop and a little bit of discussion back and forth about what could potentially be done. I think changing the conversation around what signage is allowed, creating something that allows for some operational signage for local businesses. I have a lot of data, a lot of research, a lot of ideas about what could potentially help the smaller businesses in our community. And you guys know my main point is not just about what we're going through now, which this is difficult and we're not through it, but there are things coming that are going to make it much more difficult for the businesses in our village. So I have been driving around taking a lot of pictures. We do have a lot of places that have left or are leaving because the bridge is going to be closing. Right now we have about 30,000 cars a day on average that drive down US 1, which is great. That's about an 11% increase as to what it was 6 years ago when I first went in that space. So that's great. Things are improving. When that bridge closes, it's going to be a very different story. So I know the village has been very open to out-of-the-box ideas and really kind of digging deep and looking at what can we put in the toolbox to help local businesses. And I think you guys are amazing for that, and I really appreciate you listening. Some of the things we're doing with the little pledge that's going out now is amazing. I've already had people walk in and talk to me about it and take their receipt and staple it to their card. So those kind of things are going to be really great for moving forward. I just think the game that we're playing with the signs, what's allowed and what's not. Last time I was here, I was told that a sign that size was allowed. Now it's not allowed. So I just think, I have so many pictures. I think large for lease signs don't look any better than a small sign saying we're open, or hey, we're having a craft fair this weekend. I think there are reasons to put a sign out. And when I say operational, I literally mean we're open, the A-frame sign goes out. That's a very traditional, it goes out and it comes back in. Your flutter flag goes up, it comes back in. I'm not sure why everyone hates flutter flags, but I think they can be really beautiful and professionally done. A lot of the coastal towns around the country, we accept a lot of tourists here. We like tourists, and it should look vibrant and friendly. I know you guys understand that because you put flags out that say the Village of Tequesta. It does soften that, what do you call that? The shopping mall, the strip mall. We have a lot of strip malls. So some flags and some of those things really do soften the appearance of that sterile kind of environment. So I'm not saying that everyone should be able to put out whatever they want. I know the fears, the worst case scenario, that every business would put out a flutter flag. I don't think that's the case. So that's where I would like to see the conversation go, is just ideas about new opportunities.
Okay.
I'd like to make a motion, if I can, for Amy to be able to, I know she has a variety of things to present. from a member of the Tequesas Business Association, kind of similar to the Environmental Committee, that there's a great opportunity to hear more about what's going on in businesses, because she's been actively involved talking to many, many businesses over the last couple of weeks.
Right, and we don't need a motion in a workshop. The only thing I would say, and you've been here several times, is usually on an agenda, we will put what is being done. So if there is a presentation to be made, which is what I think you're asking to do now, it becomes part of the agenda. So I understand what you're saying, but again, I'm not prepared to understand everything that you're coming forward with. I haven't seen anything in my packet to know what you're coming forward with. That's what I'm trying to say. That's why we put things on agendas, is so that council has a chance to go through it and not just react that. That said, you are here, you've been an incredible asset for everything in our village. So if you want to go forward in somewhat of an abbreviated fashion, I don't know all that you have to present to us at this time, but why don't you just go forward and we'll see how we go.
Well, and I'm sorry, I certainly didn't mean to put you on the spot. It was more of, I took the term workshop to mean that there was some back and forth.
Yeah, no doubt, we can back and forth all you want. All I'm saying is if you're presenting all new information that we haven't had a chance to even look at, it's hard to really go back and forth.
Right.
So, but let's say,
Yeah.
let's just move forward with it now. But just, that's why I want you to understand why I said what I did in terms
Okay.
of the minutes.
I'm not sure how if I could share a screen with you guys or something. If I can't, then I can certainly email these things to you guys.
Do you have this?
Yes.
If you type in that web address up there, your screen will show up on there, or we can try to get it to work up there. Oh, you have it on thumb drive, I can get it.
I have it on Google Slides, actually.
While they're doing that, I'd like to go to what's been proposed at this point and just ask a couple of basic questions
Yeah.
of our village attorney. Keith, in what's proposed here, they talk about allowing signage for businesses. They don't define the term business. Obviously, we know the churches, for example, I don't know, I put them in a definition of a business, quote unquote. So the question is, if we were to adopt something, given some of our past conversation on this,
Actually, what is your?
can we define a group that this applies to? Or are we back to, this has to be open to virtually anyone within the village community? So even if I was a resident, I could avail myself to this
No, I can't.
code provision if it were,
We're talking about temporary signs in the right of way.
yeah.
Limiting it to a particular class of, whether it's a resident versus business, or it is more difficult than putting it into the context of a special event permit process. But even then, keep in mind that generally speaking, the law does not favor less restriction for commercial speech versus non-commercial speech. In fact, our ordinance has and always has, even before the rewrite that we just went through, what's called a substitution clause. And basically what that says is you can switch the copy of any commercial speech sign to non-commercial speech back and forth whenever you want. So, you know, theoretically, you could have this process. Somebody could put the sign in at the beginning of the event, completely change the copy to something non-commercial, not related, and, you know,
You can't do it.
to non-commercial speech, and that would have to be allowed based on that non-commercial versus commercial distinction. Where that's really going to get problematic is when you get to election time.
Well,
Now, you've got somebody who applies for a special event permit to put up some sign with a commercial message. Based on the substitution clause, they can switch that out to a non-commercial message, and there's nothing you can do about it. Now you've got non-commercial messages in your right-of-way.
Well, you went to where I was leading to, which then gets into what constitutes the definition of a special event, but you're saying it doesn't really matter. Really, it doesn't really matter.
That's the
Now-
theoretical way
now-
around that is the substitution.
Now, you've also said in the past that we could pass something. Let's say we just decide we wanted to define special events, we wanted to define a group of parties that this would be applicable to. So it could be a village at the quest of business, it could be the churches, it could be a school. You know, we define who we want to be covered by this. We could pass it and put it in place. We could try to enforce it. But as you said, somebody could then challenge us on it. If nobody challenged us, it could stand for whatever length of time that,
That would be a policy decision the council would have to make. As
Right.
to whether or not you want to.
take that risk.
Correct.
Okay.
I would just want to make sure that you're aware of.
Right, that that there is a risk element there.
I can tell you, I'm not in favor of opening up the right-of-way. I'm just not. But I'm in favor of trying to relax the 5-foot rules, the rules to be able to allow the businesses to have those signs on private property, to be
Okay.
able to get notified. Notice that, hey, we're open.
I think 10 signs is too much. I said that last time, I still think that. You have one small business, I'm gonna say Park, for example. They're gonna allow 10 signs to put all over the parking lot. I would say 2 or 3
I think this is
max.
more for special.
Yeah, I think it's more like a situation, Lori, where, let's say the church is
I know,
doing
and I was
something.
pushing for just special events last time, the whole time. I think it shouldn't just be we're open. I think it should be specific to something that's going on a specific day.
Well, it does say special events in the very first
I
line, but
still
again,
think 10's too many though.
how do we define special events? And you're right, you can debate what the content of this ultimately would be if you decided to permit it. But, you know, for example, if the church is having something, do you say, well, you can only have a sign in front of the church, or can they put some additional signage out so that people around the village are more aware of what's taking place?
No, for sure, I agree with that. I think even a base of 3. You have one at the location, and then one on each side, so that way people coming from either direction are gonna see it. So let's talk about the church. They put one at the church, so you know where the church is, especially Good Shepherd, it's tucked back there. You have one maybe somewhere else that maybe they ask another business down the road, can we put this on your property, not
Right.
the easement, or not the right of way? And then they do the same thing on this side, that way both sides of Tequesti people driving back and forth will see it. I just think 10's a little excessive, you'll have
Yeah.
them all over the place.
Well, like I said, I think the issue becomes, again, one of, there's a risk element here, as Mr. Davis has described it. And so we have to decide whether that's a risk we want to take, or do we want to maintain the code as it is, and as the Vice Mayor is suggesting, simply allow perhaps a greater degree of freedom with respect to signage on private property, which would not achieve what Amy is trying to achieve.
No, I appreciate that. Go ahead, Keith.
I was just going to say, from my chair, I am in agreement with the Vice Mayor's comments that keeping things out of the right-of-way, it protects the village from exposure. Ms. Brandon's comment, I've seen that done in the past in other places where can we put our sign on your private property and you get permission to do that, so that it's, you know, so it's still not in the right-of-way or not on public property. When you move it onto public property, that changes it because of all the things we've talked about, so you can,
Right,
that would be my advice, is to stay out of the right of way, but to the
Absolutely.
extent you can find ways to relax things on
Can,
private
can,
property.
can Amy put that sign that's back there on private property now?
Which one?
what is
Any
it?
one of those two,
On private
The
property?
4 square foot.
on private property.
Yeah, you can put that in property.
So
What's the size?
It's
the,
the 27 by 18 that's allowed,
Okay,
I think.
on your own property.
Well, slightly over
Yeah,
3 feet.
so I think that was one of the things that we spoke about once, which was people don't know what the right of way is.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't actually know where or what they can do because it's very hard to find out that information. So maybe,
Why is that hard to get that information?
well, I have been looking for weeks and I still can't find out where the right of way is.
Have you talked to the building department?
I spoke to them last time I was here. I have emailed, so I haven't, is there a map or something that people can see?
Papa.
Yeah,
Okay.
Is pop-up the building, is pop-up the, right, shows right away? The property appraiser's site,
It shows a red line delineating property.
but not exact line.
It shows you about where the right of way is.
Yeah, it does.
But everybody has a survey, 25 feet of property, the survey shows the right of way.
The survey?
yeah. That's, so that would be your landlord, that would have that on file as well. Personally, I am in agreement with maybe having 5 feet become 12 feet or whatever it is. But I do not see any signs in the right-of-way. We are just opening up a can of worms. I don't even, as long as the special event sign, and I think you have to apply for that, is on private property. So if a realtor has an open house, they can put their open house sign on the private property. I don't like to see it at corners, throughout. It just cheapens the village as far as I'm concerned. What I would also say that if you have building signage, it has to be, so you can see it. And I know you've talked about your one site where there's a tree in front of that. And I don't know if that's in the right-of-way or if that is your landlord's tree. Has that been determined?
No, I don't know. But if I could see, yeah, if there was a map or something that I could see, that would.
But you've put an A-frame sign there by that tree, by those trees,
We were putting an A-frame sign there,
Right at
yes,
the-
every day for
for
10
years. And that sign has been removed. Was that removed because it was an A-frame or because it was in the right-of-way?
I was told it was because it was an A-frame.
Because it's an A-frame.
Because the distance on the A-frame to the door, they call allow 5 feet.
It was more than 5 feet.
So she could put an open sign like this, but not an A-frame.
It's on the sign.
You've seen this before.
Yeah. No, with the new code, with the new code that was passed, okay, temporary sign is not allowed neither on private property or on the village right away, period.
So,
As long as it.
so those signs are not allowed in private property?
No, not at all.
Well, but I mean, that's not a special event that she has.
He's considering
This
that
one
a,
I do
Yeah.
every day, we're not talking about a special event, we're talking 2 different events.
No.
what designates a permanent sign versus a temporary sign?
But a permanent sign would be something fixed either to the building or to the ground. So that would be a permanent sign.
Typically, your permanent sign, and that's the whole other side of the sign code that we still have to.
Clean up.
But I know there's a desire to look at, and that's typically the signs that are either monument signs
Right.
that require a building permit, that might have, features with electricity and illumination, that might, that's your, especially in commercial, that's your main advertiser, that's.
How people know where people
signage.
are.
That's what you're looking for.
Right.
We haven't even talked about that.
No.
So how do we look at temporary signs on private property? Does that open up a can of worms?
So the temporaries, the way we did this last ordinance, we sort of divided it up between commercial speech and non-commercial speech.
Mhm.
And because you can't, if you say political sign, now that's content-based.
Yep.
But the law does allow a certain amount of greater restriction for commercial speech in terms of copy, because there's an interest, the government has an interest in making sure that the commercial transaction being advertised is accurate and the information is honest and correct. So there's a limited amount of going into the copy that you can do on commercial speech versus non-commercial speech. What we allow, and so the temporary sign, we generally talk about it in terms of like for sale, for rent, and that sort of thing.
But those aren't allowed on private property.
No, they aren't.
Yeah,
But-
sure they are.
But then what's the difference?
But I think the question is not so much content. I don't think there's any objectionable content here, but Jose, are you saying that these temporary signs, even if they're on private property,
They're not allowed.
are not permitted?
So they can't be daily. They're not permanently attached.
But if
They're
we-
temporarily because you can take them out.
You can put them out.
But
But
if we-
they can't put them out daily, Because for me, that's not temporary, that's daily. You're just not
I hear-
attaching.
I
No,
hear-
that's temporary.
Playing with words now, but if we consider a for sale sign temporary,
Yes, because it's
What's the difference?
associated with
Sell the
once the
property.
transaction is closed, then it has to go away.
but if that temporary sign is not allowed, what's the difference between the two?
Because,
There's no end date.
I beg your pardon?
There's no end date.
It's closed.
Right, so I guess that would be commercial speech not associated with a particular event. We allow one non-commercial speech sign not associated with a particular event on private property.
So that would be allowed, one sign would be allowed.
No, that's usually the monument sign, though, isn't it?
No, that's just a temporary sign.
Oh, okay.
That's non-commercial in nature, and and the reason that we say not associated with a particular event is a way to make a distinction between political signs, or, because that's always associated with an election, so that's the way you can always get those removed after the event, as opposed to, the most typical example of a non-commercial temporary sign is a, sports team, supporting a sports team, that you can have one of those all the time, as long as it complies with the size requirements and location requirements.
So for a strip mall can have one sign, or each business in that strip mall?
Non-commercial,
And I wish we didn't have to get so technical.
This is,
the way we wrote it is per parcel,
Okay,
per event, so, but.
or non-event.
Right, so,
Okay.
but, again, for your commercial properties, the main advertising is contemplated in your permanent signage, your monument signs, or your wall signs, or
Right.
not throwing up those
Mhm.
kind of things that
Yep.
have aesthetic clutter behind them. And those are very typical temporary sign regulations. It seems to me that if we're looking for ways to allow businesses to have more advertising, as I said, we haven't even looked at the permanent signage part of our code yet. You have it, but there's been a lot of comments that it needs a review and it needs an update. And that may be really the place that this discussion needs to happen, as opposed to your little cardboard signs that go in and go out.
So I know this conversation can kind of go all over the place, but when we're talking about the A-frame, Jeremy, I don't know if you could pull it up on the main screen. It's basically just Google from a street view of where Oceana is on Dixie.
She's up there. What is that on?
It's on Google, if you just go to Street View. There are trees that block the actual monument sign.
right, and that was what I was saying.
Right,
The
so
trees need to be
if
adjusted.
if our businesses are having trouble having their business seen from the monument, maybe we just need to address that and then treat the temporary signs for special events.
I think that, the challenge, once again, is we want to do what we can to help the businesses.
For sure, I mean, that's an easy fix though, that's
Well,
grooming.
but do you want to take down trees?
No,
Okay.
but if
No,
that's
I
groomed a
think-
certain way, it could be.
But
I think there's, and this is what I'm talking about with the games, like we're going all around the different issues where, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm a small business owner. My job is to find every way to market and promote my
Correct.
business. So I don't just use signs. Most people don't. But even if I am faced with a challenge, I'm gonna try and find a way around it, So and this is where it becomes, you put the rules, if they don't really fit for everyone, people are going to try and find something that does fit. How can I need to be visible.
And it's-
So that entrepreneurial drive of, this is what I need to do to survive and keep my business thriving, they're going to find ways.
I mean, the tough thing here, and this is what it always becomes, it's a balancing act. On one hand, you're saying, I think we all want to see these businesses in our village prosper to the extent that they fully can. So you want to give them the latitude and the flexibility to be able to promote their business and move their business forward. On the other hand, you don't want to destroy the ambiance of the village, which is detrimental to the businesses as well, and you don't want to have a clutter of signs all over the place. So it's like, And then there's going to be some people that will abuse it, and some people will act responsibly.
Of course.
And that's one of the difficult things with legislation, is you try to write something, to your point, that is a catch-all that can help, obviously, the majority of people, but may not help everyone. But you're trying to balance these competing interests, and sometimes, as we have found with all of our discussions on the signage issue, it's very difficult. You think you come up with something that makes sense, but then immediately somebody comes back and says, well, wait a minute, this is not working for me. And it may not be working for others as well. I think going back to what the mayor suggested is, I think it would help for you to provide us with the presentation that you've put forth. And I know you and Kyle are both working on, the Tequesta Business Group. I think if we could have a cohesive presentation put forth that we could review ahead of time and take a look at, and come back to this, because I don't think we're going to make any decisions tonight.
Well, what I put together was really just, it's a conversation starter. So it's not really very formal. It's nothing that is going to offend or, make someone unhappy.
No, I understand that, but I think the more the businesses can kind of get together and work some things out themselves and come forward with a proposal. I mean, I'm sure we all have some ideas and thoughts on the subject as well, but I think that would be a good starting point, because then we could say, okay, this is what the business community is asking for, this is what you're seeking, and here's the reasons why. And maybe as part of that, there's even some thoughts as to how you self-police, or what the limitations or constraints need to be. And if you can bring that forth to the council and let us look at that and then have that conversation, which is, I think, what the mayor was suggesting originally, I think that would be beneficial.
And I can certainly do that. The
And
last time
Amy-
I was here, this was allowed, so I went out and purchased signs. Then there was a new ordinance in October that made this not allowed. So I think that, if we can have some conversation, I am completely invested in this, not just for my own business, but for the prosperity of our community. So I do think it's important that the smaller businesses have a good opportunity to compete with some of the larger ones. I don't want to see 100 for lease signs in the village of Tequesta. I mean, I have a lot of photos. That's not what we want to portray either. I would rather see 100 flutter flags than 100 for lease signs.
Well, and you pointed out something that is certainly a concern, which is something we need to be thinking about, is that we've had COVID, and we've had to address the circumstances of COVID, but you're right, the bridge is coming right behind it. And that is going to have a detrimental effect. And in some ways, that is as much of an emergency, quote unquote, or a disruptive event as COVID has been. So
I guess,
we
if you don't mind,
do need to look at it.
I'm trying to understand what you were stating earlier, Mr. Davis, about commercial signage, not permanent, but having each unit space allowed to have one
Non-commercial message.
non-commercial message.
The commercial message.
Is because they're open?
Temporary signage is typically the for sale, for lease.
Got it.
Um,
So it's got it.
In terms of, but because the law allows a commercial message to be substituted with a non-commercial message, like Happy Father's Day or I Love Tequesta, we also have to provide the opportunity for that to happen, but if it's a non-commercial message, we can limit it, so we limit it to one of these temporary signs per parcel.
So we currently do not allow a temporary commercial message.
For sale, for lease, open house, we allow those.
Right.
But a temporary sign that, is just advertising the business, doing the job of what a permanent sign should do, no, that would not be, that's not allowed under the ordinance. I don't think it was previously allowed. Again, the idea is that type of advertising and signage is on the permanent side. That should be the real sign. It's really advertising a business. The temporary sign is meant to be there for a limited and temporary short-term purpose, and then it goes away. It's not meant
To be a permanent everyday event.
It's not meant to permanently advertise anything. It's meant, it has a very limited and targeted purpose, and when that has occurred, it's supposed to be removed. So it's never meant to be there for any length of time.
I would like to propose a new word, a new term that maybe it's operational signage or maybe it's functional signage. I don't know how the A-frame got such a bad rap, because it has been something that has been used for a very long time all around the country. It's a very, you know, you can have fun with it. It's definitely a sign that, you know, I know for me, if I drive by and the A-frame sign is not out, someone is not at work on time. You know, I have other ways of knowing that, but that is one of the signs. But it's also a sign to my customers. If the sign's not out, they're not ready to brew you coffee. So that functional aspect of we're open, we're closed, we're open, we're closed. It is life, it's functional, it's things happening, so it's not a temporary sign because it is a daily thing. It's not a permanent thing because I can take it in. So I think it's a new term. You know, if we could come up with a new term that could be supportive, and I'm definitely not proposing that I think it's a conversation starter. I think it's a way to kind of dig deep and think about how can we support the village and the business community, because they naturally support each other.
I guess I've noticed a couple A-frame signs, yours being one of them, Perk being another, knowing that
Gallery Grill
Gallery Grill,
has
they've
them.
all been,
They're illegal.
But those are allowed.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, that's not a problem.
they're illegal within 5 feet of the front door.
So they have to be sandwich boards no larger than 36 inches tall by 24 inches wide, located adjacent to the business storefront and no further than 5 feet from the entrance, which do not interfere with the sidewalk or all the building code accessibility requirements. And can be brought in at the end of the day, put back out at the beginning of the day. So yes, they have to be adjacent to the storefront and close, you know, if you wanted to change that 5 feet to 10 feet or something, you know, those kinds of things are certainly within the council's purview. And
So if we made that
but in
20
terms of
feet, what
putting it-
issues?
So if you put that,
I think the idea is the close proximity, there's a purpose behind
Yeah.
close proximity because it ties back to the business.
I think that, correct.
Yeah.
Now, your sign in particular, that's on this cement wall on the outside of the treaties. So it's probably to Cuesta property technically. It's almost like you're trying to get drivers' attention, which I can understand. But that's why you can, but I'm assuming that's why you don't put your sign so close to your store, because you're trying to get their attention way over here.
I would love them to see us before they have to
Which
turn in.
is kind of ironic to me, because again, if we were to groom that tree that's near the monument sign, then drivers might see the actual monument sign. So your sign is literally next to the monument sign.
I'm not sure which picture you're looking at, but.
I'm literally looking at Google.
And the
You,
A-frame
you,
sign.
your A-frame sign is right next to the monument sign.
Correct.
Yeah, so obviously the monument sign for that location of yours is not working. So for me, I think that needs to be corrected
Well,
before
and that was in the same spot we had it every day forever.
Right.
So that is right in the middle of the two entrances.
But even if we extended it to 12 feet, which I'm not disagreeing with, that's still too far for 12 feet. You can't put it in the middle of the parking lot for you. So I'm trying to think for you too. And then the other stores could start putting them out the road, then you're gonna have Old Dixie be covered in sandwich
Well,
boards.
Here's another good
private property.
example, and I think this goes back also to communication when businesses come into the village, when they lease a space initially. You know, it's small business owners, you know what you're supposed to do. You need to put signs out to promote your business. The businesses within the Gallery Square North are always, in my mind, some of the most poorly signed. You can't find them, you can't see them, you don't know they're there because they're tucked back
Sure.
in that little thing. So, you know, I don't think it's the end of the world if the guy with the wine store wants to put an A-frame out. He's brand new, no one knows he's there. So if he just sits back there, yes, you've got social media, you've got all these other avenues of advertising that cost you money. Yes, you should do that. I don't see the problem with allowing him to put some visibility on the street for himself. I don't think every business is going to do it. I don't think accountants and dentists and, architects, they're not all gonna put A-frame signs out. This is a functional sign that is an open and closed sort of,
But don't stores do open and close in the windows?
I
Like,
was
I
gonna
know,
ask
I
you,
know
you
Ace
can't-
Hardware is open, because when I drive by, it
Yeah.
says open.
can you see the wine guy's signs from anywhere?
Now, the wine guy is and I feel for him, and I've talked
I
to
do
people
too.
about that, because he is really wedged back in there.
Yeah.
I think that has to get really creative. And
Well, that's-
honestly, I think for him to use any other kind of signage without talking to the landlord, as one sign that says wine, that doesn't even tell me where he is, because again, that sign's on the road, kind of like your sign.
Right.
If it needs to be inwards, but again, that goes back to the landlords almost. If we can get landlords to get with their tenants and get creative on how can we do this to where it makes sense. Because again, I see a sign that says wine, where? Somewhere
Right.
in the shopping center, but see, he's very specific, because I have to know to go through that hall, that little courtyard area.
But if you don't have a sign at all, you have no reason to even think about wine.
But see, for me, that's a bigger problem.
Yeah.
That's a shopping center problem.
It is,
Well-
it's a problem of the tenant. The tenant came and said, I want to open up the wine. This is what they wanted to do. They have a landlord that they could have gone to understand sign codes, or they could have come here to understand the sign codes, but they chose to open the store in a very tucked back place. And so then that becomes somewhat of the village's problem, or that's what we're hearing. And let's just say this, flutter flags, blow up things, signs all over. I don't want us looking like Belvedere, because that's what you see on Belvedere. And accountants do it. You're going to see that Uncle Sam guy that goes back and forth, because now it's tax time. Go down to Boca, go to Meisner Park, go into City Place, or whatever it's called now. You don't see those things. They are classy places, and people find them and go to the stores there, because that's what the code is. And that is, if you choose a tenant to move into a place in the village, then you need to be able to, or would expect to understand your limitations or what you can do in the village. And so that, for me, Amy, when I go through a lot of this, I get just a little upset about it, because it shouldn't be the village's problem if somebody knew where they were going, and then all of a sudden, they can't put out signs along US 1, which that's my problem.
I don't think it's very clear when people, yes, of course, they should do all their research, they should know what
Yes.
they're doing. I would rather see that person stay in business than
Yes,
fail because no one knew he was there. And I think
don't disagree. Don't
Sorry.
disagree, but that's a landlord issue with monument signs and other types of signage.
That plaza has 6 flags
Right.
out in front.
Mhm.
There's no problem with visibility of the plaza,
Right.
and this is where things start getting creative. Can that person put a flag up on one of those flag poles for his business? Is that a possibility? I
Again,
mean, this is where you start going, I gotta do something to survive, so I'm gonna think outside the box.
I think signage is one small part of the equation for success. And I agree that it can have some measurable impact, but it is not by any means the core of what a business needs to do to survive. It's more incremental. So again, I think the village, I agree with the mayor. You come into the council would like to do what it can to help, okay? But we also have to keep in mind, again, as I said earlier, it's a balancing act. We want to maintain the ambience of the community, the attractiveness of the community. That's important to our businesses as well. It's an important reason people come here and live here. And those are the people that are primarily supporting your business. Not solely, but are your primary customers. So that's why I said earlier, I think if the business community can come together and you can look at where you think the constraints are and where you think there's some ideas that could be helpful. But I also want you to keep in mind, not just putting your business hat on and saying, well, I'm a business owner and I'm an entrepreneur and I want to do everything to make my business succeed. You need to take a broader, more holistic view of what it means to succeed within this community and what the impact is on the community as a whole. And if you can put some ideas together in a meaningful way and then come sit down with us so that you know, we can have, and get it to us in advance so we can read it, as the mayor said, review it, think about it, have our questions, and then sit there and have a discussion. Obviously, the manager, the village attorney, Jose are gonna all be involved in this, and we'll see what we can come up with. But again, it's that balancing act that we've gotta, you know, keep in mind.
I guess let me add a couple things to perspective here. One, this is on a workshop because the council brought this up as something that we wanted to continue to discuss. Amy, as a business owner, noticed this, that thought, hey, this might be a good opportunity to come in and get a better understanding and show up and participate, which we are thankful for since no one really does that. So I think that's really special. The other thing is, you've been in business there for 8 years, 9 years, maybe a little bit less, 10 years, and you've had a temporary sign there for 10 of them. And so it is part of the village's problem because we haven't enforced our code. And now we have started to enforce our code, which is now causing an impact to that business that has been doing it for 10 years. So I think we really need to take that into consideration to try to help and maybe come up with a solution, not come up with a solution, or a better job explaining it. Why are we deciding to enforce it now? And I think it's important that we're enforcing it, but we need to start looking at what can we do to help the different situations. Doesn't open up Pandora's box, but, you know, if we had signage, A-frame sign, measure that distance to your business and see what it looks like, and if that works, great. Does that really open up a can of worms? I don't think it will. And at least get that A-frame sign back to where it was until we can get that permanent sign solution.
Well, I don't think, it didn't sound like the A-frame sign was the issue, but I want to go back to what the village attorney said. I think,
But
in your
is the issue.
particular.
That's what
No,
caused
the
it.
issue is that sign right there.
No, the issue is the A-frame sign, but it was
I
removed.
did this to take
Oh.
That was
place.
Oh, you had the A
A-frame.
sign out in that location?
Yeah.
Okay, I
That's the one you
understand.
bring in and out and is in the right of way.
Yeah.
So
But
I
it
bought
is not in the
these
right
to
of
solve
way.
that
It's a
issue.
private property.
It's not an A-frame.
Just not within 5 feet.
But I think what the village
you
attorney
sure?
said is important, because he was saying,
We just need to
the real issue here for some of the
I'm fine
businesses,
with that.
including yours, sounds like it may be more the monument sign.
Correct.
And the lack of visibility of that sign. And that may
Maybe
be
it's within
the
linear
conversation
and not like what
we need to really be
we don't
focusing on. I tend to agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, we,
Shopping
Correct.
Maybe
to
it's,
that point, our
it's gotta
code
be,
understands
right.
that, and right
Straight
now,
line.
I'm good with
and I
that.
think this is carryover language, it's always been in there, we allow certain temporary signs like those pending the manufacture and erection of the permanent sign.
correct.
We allow certain volume of window signage based on a percentage of the total window space.
Which, we've got realtors that have multiple signs all throughout their windows of houses for
There's a lot of
sale.
places right now, and I think it's
That are
more of an
being
act
blocked.
of desperation, like, please notice us that we're here.
You know, we also provide those types of signage, but to your point, that, you know, it does recognize the permanent sign is the means that the village provides for permanent advertising of the business.
I don't think anyone's saying that it's not Tequesta's problem. But what I was saying is, if you were to move your A-frame sign, because A-frame signs are allowed, if you were to move it closer to your building, my point was, if you feel like your clientele doesn't know your business is back there, my issue was that it's a landlord problem if you want to start putting signage above your windows, like, to start, if you feel like that monument sign isn't enough. That's something you take up with your landlord if he wants to try to go to the building department and community developer and try to come up with.
I don't think it would be allowed under the current
Right, but
code
I'm saying
anyway.
that's a conversation you would have to have if you feel like that's a direction, or you need a new location, maybe you've outgrown that location. Maybe you're too popular for right there.
I don't think we
Maybe I
want you to
need a new
move.
location.
Not
No.
saying leave Tequesta, I'm just saying,
No.
Well, so,
Maybe another-
look, I think there's an opportunity here for us all to have a conversation
I
and to
agree.
think broader about the future. I'm here tonight because the content, the theme for tonight was signs. So I do want to be involved in that conversation. You know, there's, of course, many other aspects to running a successful business. And I'm working with Kyle, we are working with TBA, the Hobe Sound Chamber. There's a lot of things that we can do, but that's what I want to, I'm trying to help facilitate and maybe put a little bit of urgency underneath it because of what's
Yeah.
coming down the pike.
Well,
You know,
and-
I will survive. I will find an umbrella that I can
Yeah.
put my logo on. I can there's other things I can do. I can put a sign holder out on the street. Like, if I really want to get creative, I will make sure that I'm visible. But this is just to start that conversation of how do we support each other and think ahead, and maybe come up with some new terms that we've never used in the village. Maybe they're not using them in Jupiter. Maybe we become the people that they go, you know, that was a great idea, that actually helped.
Yeah, I'm not sure terminology is the issue here. I think it's a matter of the execution of ideas, but I think that you just mentioned, you know, a broader conversation, and I think that's where we bring the monument sign portion into this discussion, because, again, we need to look at it holistically, not just one segment at a time. We need to look at the totality of how can the village do its best to help the businesses find a solution, but at the same time, make sure that, again, it reflects the interests of the entire community, and again, as we always use this term of ambiance and aesthetics and all that, but that is important to the village, and it's important to the businesses as well. So I think that broader conversation is necessary, but again, I think the more that you can get the business association together, come up with some ideas, even if they're ideas that you'd have to take back to landlords or whatever, and maybe the village can help you in that regard, but the more you can do that, get it to us, we can think about it, talk about it, give the village attorney and the village manager and Jose an opportunity to weigh in on some of these things in advance, then I think we can sit down and have a meaningful conversation. Like I said, you got COVID, you got the bridges coming, there's a lot of things we need to be concerned about, and could hopefully be a conversation that leads to some solutions.
So when we talk about moving it from 5 feet and extending it out, I'm not against extending the footage, but I don't think the same footage is going to be effective for each shopping center.
Right.
Because like she mentioned, Gallery Square, very open in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we want to go about doing that? You guys have
What
thoughts?
if you just said not in the right of way? and
Right.
not
It's private property.
impacting ADA?
So you know, it's kind of like I was saying earlier, and I know Mr. Jambra's going on it again, and I do agree with it. I think if businesses work together and build relationships with each other, you know, use each other's spaces, whether it's a special event or you have a special day, like we're doing a roasting day. I think that's your best bet off the top of my head, is start working with your fellow business neighbors.
Well, I'm saying have the businesses work together to come back with ideas to present to us. In terms of what they think might be possible solutions, but it needs to be reviewed by the village attorney, the village manager, code.
Right, that's what I'm saying, after
We need
we
to look at it.
clarify where we want to go with it, but I'm saying a big part of it is the business working together.
Well, I don't know that we
Well,
clarify,
we're
I don't
very
think we
collaborative.
clarify it ahead of time. I think we get that input, then we have a conversation, then we come to a decision. I don't think we should be coming to it with a predetermined mind as to what is or
No,
isn't.
that's not what I'm saying, I'm just saying, at the end of the day,
Okay.
it'd be great if the village itself, the residents and the business community can work together.
Yeah, agreed.
Because we all have
Agreed.
the same goal. We all want everyone to be successful. We all want to keep the small businesses and privately owned places. That's everyone's goal, right?
Yep.
And I'm not so sure, Amy, because I've spoken to some of the businesses that have moved on. Tuesday morning is closing all over the country. They have been consolidating. Can't think the name of it, with all the marine.
Nautical, but nice.
Nautical but nice. The landlord came in and jacked that rent. That was one of the things. So it's not so much that it was Tequesta or their sign, because they've been very successful there, and as you know. But when you come in and a landlord says, oh, by the way, it's now add another 50% to your, that's not, you know, it's not, again, I don't think it's a sign.
I'm not blaming the village of Tequesta.
No, but I'm
or-
saying, even with COVID, but even with these other things, we cannot just point to that and say, well, this is COVID, or this is, you know, definitely going to be US 1. We have to work with everyone, but I feel strongly, very strongly, as you know, I do not want the village of Tequesta to look junky. I don't want signs all over the place. I definitely don't want the flutter banners. They remind me of a used car lot. I'm sorry. That's
Never
what I
said
see.
for 'em.
That's all I see.
Well, it might be good to have some other examples
There-
that,
And we can
Times are
certainly
changing.
look at that, but not every business is in agreement with you on how they want to do it, and that's gonna be the other problem. You know, we have to make sure that it's well-rounded. I know that you're working now with the TBA, and maybe that's where it comes from. And that was the whole purpose of that group to begin with, is that they would be the governmental liaison, if you would. So we wouldn't be getting one company here, or just you, or just somebody else, that they'd work together with the businesses and then come up with some ideas as Frank is pointing out as well,
Took off.
that we can look at that are reasonable and reflect the entire village of Tequesta. That's what I'd love if you could get that.
Yes, so, a couple things, and I think we probably can move on.
Yeah, we
but,
just,
The signage, can we specifically make changes based on to how it is coded, section, commercial, C2, C1, wherever it might be? Because where their particular location, it's next to a auto body facility, it's across the street from a ready-mix concrete facility. So having aesthetics pleasing for junkie and whatever, it's in a unique
yes.
area. Can we get specific into that type of?
Can we do that, Keith?
Something I could look into. I don't know off the top of my head, but I see the point.
I'm pretty sure you can do it by district.
Because of this, I know right
That's a
now we
smart
kind of have it
idea.
divided between commercial districts and residential
Right.
districts. I think as long as there's a meaningful distinction between C3 and C1,
C1.
which
Mhm.
neighborhood versus
Right.
practically light industrial.
Right.
There certainly are different aesthetic.
They can have signs that spin.
Yeah, so there's probably
I'm smiling.
a defensible way to address, divide that distinction up even more between the intensity of the uses in the commercial district.
This is just a quick question for you. Amy, do you have a neon open sign in the window of your establishment
Yes.
there?
I do.
Okay.
It's more
So
of,
somebody driving by, if they don't see because of the tree, can clearly see an open sign.
If they happen to turn their head left, yes.
Or if they happen to turn their head left to see the sandwich board.
you can see the sandwich board
One is
further down
much
the
more
road.
Do you know what I'm
Than the
saying?
other.
I'm,
course.
You can see the sandwich board earlier. You really can.
yeah, well,
And
but
it
You're
allows
seeing,
them.
if you happen to see the open sign, you're already past and that's
Yeah.
done.
You're hoping
I'm
to turn
just-
around. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Well,
just think there's an opportunity to look to the future
we
and
can,
do
we can
things
look at
differently.
that piece. I think here, we don't want to be able to say a sandwich board can be 20 feet, because here you have the gallery grill, and now they're down towards 20 feet down into their neighbors.
Yeah,
Perhaps there's a way, if it's in a linear fashion in some way, that this is clearly, something that would apply to your store, that it is in front of your store, that somehow this greater number of feet might work. I know we're really looking at that as something that we're trying to address when there's a bigger picture, obviously, for the whole village.
that's
And-
more of my concern. I think I
Right.
do a very good job of reaching out to my
Yeah.
customers. They know we're open,
They
they know
know
what we
you.
do. We're very involved in the community. We do host events. So I don't think I'm not really talking about myself in this situation. Yes, it was very upsetting to have to take that sign in. I went out and purchased new signs to comply,
Right.
and then the rule was changed.
Right,
So,
right.
but the bigger picture for me is, there's a lot of for lease signs. There's a lot of empty spaces, and I
I
care
hear what you're
about
saying.
helping people get through this next part.
I hear what you're saying.
That's all
I'd
it
like to
is.
go back to asking you, and certainly with the vice mayor, putting together a package, all right? Make sure there's other stores that are interested in these things as well, so that it's not just one. And you've always been the spokesperson, and you're a fabulous asset for every business in Tequesta. Don't get me wrong, but it would be great to have some buy-in with other stores as well, that they would be willing to either be here or at least be part of the package, something like that. Put that together for us, a presentation that we could ultimately have on the screen, but it's something that we can go through, just like Frank said, and let's move it from, and again, a workshop is a workshop, but it's the council's workshop. And essentially getting, information like you're bringing to us, it would be so much better if we had time. And the vice mayor is insisting on 7 days before meetings to be able to have these things as
Well,
much as possible to have in our packages.
Again, I just think we're just taking advantage of
right.
her efforts, which is.
No, I
wonderful.
appreciate that, but it's still, I think if we could do that, we're not going to do anything tonight. We are not acting on this. It's a workshop. We're not going to bring it to a council meeting next until we get this resolved.
Awesome. All right, well, let me know how I can go about presenting that.
Okay,
This is certainly not the only thing that I do for
Okay.
my business.
I understand.
Or for our community. But I would love to, I can certainly bring some other people to the party.
Okay.
And,
I know we're having an event on a week from today
yep,
That's-
December 7th.
at your rotisserie, or not rotisserie, the one on US 1. And that's where we're trying to get a big push for the local businesses.
Good.
To come and participate and get a better understanding of what's kind of what we're trying to do as a group.
Excellent.
I will say publicly, I am somewhat concerned about that relationship with Hope Sound Chamber. You know, they've kind of been involved for a little over a year now, and I think there's maybe about 15 businesses that are Village of Tequesta businesses that are members of the Hope Sound Chamber. And so, or the TBA. So that is one area that I find out there's a lot of businesses that don't necessarily want to participate in that chamber organization just because it says Hope Sound Chamber.
I was saying, because it's confusing.
But we had the same issue with the TBA.
Well,
When Matt was that really out there, for the council to be able to take a look at. I know my memory isn't so good, so I need all the help I can get.
Longest 3 minutes of your life. Well, I appreciate it, and that's all I wanted to do was
Thank
really
you.
continue the conversation, so.
Thank you, Amy.
All right, thank you very much.
Mayor Brennan?
Yes.
We have another comment on the subject.
I'm sorry?
From Mr. Bradford.
Oh, Mr. Bradford.
3 minutes only.
Continue to play our.
3 minutes it will be.
That's all you get.
For the record, Thomas Bradford, 44 Chestnut Trail, Tequesta. And as a resident, when I saw this backup, I freaked out, okay? I mean, it was scary bad. So I'm going to read this because I think there's some points in what I wrote that need to be touched on, and it should be done in 2 minutes. Prohibition of any private signage in any public right-of-way is a sacrosanct rule or law of every federal, state, county, and municipality within the United States. The proposed off-premise temporary sign permit provisions before you fly in the face of long-established prohibitions of such temporary signage and will lead to aesthetic nightmares which will embarrass a village intent on maintaining proper standards, lead to visual pollution and legal headaches that many of you do not seem to know about. In addition, prior to Councilman Prince being on this council, I thought he'd be here tonight, both your village manager and your village attorney advised against allowing signs in the right-of-way, and they have done so again tonight, and I'm glad to hear that. The proposed permit makes no mention of the fact that the permit has no applicability in the right-of-way controlled by others. The state of Florida does not allow any private signage in right-of-way, neither does Palm Beach County or Martin County, and Tequesta cannot issue permits for activities not allowed in the right-of-way controlled by others. This means VOT cannot issue temporary sign permits on US 1, Old Dixie Highway, or County Line Road, except perhaps where the mobile gas station abuts County Line Road. This should be clearly stated in the permit application to ensure the building official only issues permits within right-of-way controlled by the village. I'm glad most of you are opposed to any permits or signs in the right-of-way. Temporary signs are a form of free speech and protected by the United States Constitution. You are not allowed to pick winners and losers when it comes to free speech. You are proposing that this draft permit to allow businesses to exercise free speech in the right-of-way, but by de facto disallowing residents to exercise their right to free speech in the right-of-way, and you are not allowing political signs and other forms of free speech in the right-of-way. In addition, when you correct this permit, businesses not abutting VOT right-of-way, such as on US 1, are in a disadvantaged class when it comes to exercise their free speech relative to those who are on village right-of-way. Thus, you would be discriminating in the exercise of free speech. By approving this permit, you will be ascending a slippery slope from which there is no return. Not to mention opening yourselves up for expensive litigation from the affected classes who are denied the same rights as those businesses abutting Tequesta right-of-way. There is a reason no government allows signs in the right-of-way temporary. Legally, if you allow one, you end up having to allow all of them. It's very simple. A couple of things about the permit. Item 3 seems to be written to exclude placement of signage in swales, which is just fine with me, but I don't think that's the intent. Item 8 allows up to 12 temporary special event signs at the same time. This appears to conflict with item 2 with a cap of 10. Item 9 does not define what a special event is. Mr. DeAmber said that. It is strongly recommended you nix this temporary sign permit and right-of-way idea. Find another way to help our businesses in these difficult times. This sign idea is not the answer, and it is not sustainable in the long run. Preserve the character of the village by not adding clutter to our roadways. Thank you for your consideration, and I will answer any questions. Please don't solve a landlord-tenant problem that is not the village's problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bradford. Do you have that in writing?
Yes, ma'am.
Can you send that to the clerk and Mr. Allen, and they can disseminate it to us?
Yes, okay.
Thank you.
I have one more signage question,
Okay.
if you don't mind. We've recently put up a bunch of golf cart signs along a variety of different roads. Can we get a count of how many village requested signs we have throughout the right-of-way that are not like stop signs and street signs? So I would imagine we have a bunch, and I think that is in addition part of the signage pollution. I know that word's been around before. And also curious, what budget line item did the cost of those signs come out of?
I can tell you, we have a line item for signage.
Just general signage?
Just general signage out of the Public Works budget, but we will get you a count of everything in the right-of-way, minus stop signs, yield signs, things like that.
You talk about inside the communities as well?
Yeah, I
Because
think that's
Right
what
away,
he's talking
yeah.
about.
That's been a long-term problem in some of the communities. The HOAs they've fought hard a couple of times over the past several years to remove some of the
Some of it.
excessive
Mhm.
signage.
I
Right.
mean, I think if it's good for the businesses, it's
But
good
you
for
are
the
referring
residents.
to all of Tequesta, not just the main roads, yes?
Right away, within the village of Tequesta.
Without, yeah, the whole village.
Because I
Okay.
think
I'm sorry.
that golf cart sign, I think, is a little bit, causes some issues with people that have that slow vehicle, registered slow-moving vehicle golf cart, where they can drive along that road and legally, and that sign basically saying no golf carts allowed, but
Right.
yet they can. And so it's,
Right. Slow-moving vehicles only or something.
yeah,
Okay.
I'm not a big fan of signs.
No, I understand. I
On the
know
right of way.
there were good intention on that. All right, so can we move on now? Item 3, thank you. This is a discussion on the community center construction and financing, and thank you very much, Jeremy, for that nice listing and dates and all of the important things that are coming up. So I don't know if there's much more that you need to add to that.
No, I mean, that was, I guess, what was kind of asked of me, provide some dates, you know, and how this kind of meshed together with the borrowing versus the community center part of it. You know, I know that was asked about, you know, how, you know, changes come about, how would that go through? They would go through either myself or Greg. If it's a monetary change, of course, we'd bring that to council, so that way you guys would be aware of that and be able to sign off on that. So, I mean, if there's specific questions that might help with any conversation, but, so I just kind of put those together for you.
Okay, any questions?
I guess the only question I have is the concern of bank loan agreement and closing being pushed back past a time where money is needed to pay whatever contractor. Are we getting close to any?
Well, we have plenty of, like I say, cash in order to fund that part of it. You know, we'd be in the demo stage. But we have a resolution that will allow us to reimburse ourselves, so when we do get that money in, say, February, or here it is in January 21st, if we, you know, spent $300,000, we can reimburse ourselves that $300,000. So as far as cash available to pay the contractor, that is not an issue at this point.
When we demo, are we gonna fully close the park or close half of it?
So throughout this whole thing, they're still working on the whole plan of attack, but they know our intent is to keep the park open, as much of the park open as much of the time. So, you know, there's gonna be pieces of this when they start putting in the big, you know, a big beam or something like that, they may have to close a portion of the park. With the demo part, I have not heard about them closing the park for the demo part,
Okay.
so.
I mean, obviously, just we have a lot of children, so
Yeah.
safety is a concern.
Yeah.
But that'll be the number one of why we close it is, you know, if there's gonna be a safety concern, but they're gonna try to keep it open as much as we can. So when I say demo part, it should stay open, don't hold me to that, because there may be a day or two where they
That's
have to
fine. I know
close
Greg's
it.
really good about posting and updating, at least online, when park is closed for maintenance and stuff.
Yeah.
I'm sure he'll be on that.
Yeah. Any other questions on this topic?
On this topic with regards to Greg's department having a place to go, has anything come to fruition on that?
Yes, we actually, we had some language that we had to work out with the contract for the lease of a building. I think, what's your shopping center, what is there a name to that shopping center?
390?
390,
Yeah, there's an
Questa
empty
Drive.
space there.
So there's I think a 1,200 square foot space for him, reasonable price within our budget, because we did budget for that. And it'll be under the threshold to bring to council, so I should be able to sign off on that. We're working on the final language legal, so, and then we gotta make sure that we can get internet and all that up and going. So I've not touched base with Greg on that today, but I know that it was getting pretty close before I left, so we should be able to take that off pretty quick.
Jeremy, I saw that in your report. Is that going to be are we going to do a one-year term?
1 year, 1 return.
Okay.
Okay, that's good. Is thank you in order for you?
No, I
I
actually,
didn't know if you had-
I actually worked in that
That's
unit
fine.
temporarily when I had my
Yeah,
fire, and
uh-huh.
so
I didn't know if you had helped
it's
us
a great
with that.
temporary spot.
Well, excellent. All right, is there anything else on any topic? May I have
I
a
would
motion?
just like to say thanks to Greg and everybody else who's gonna be helping him for allowing the businesses to join in on the Santa parade. Because as we are all trying to work on is helping our businesses get as much exposure as possible. And I think that's a very fun, lighthearted way. And plus they'll be in front of every single village resident, since they go up and down every road. So thank you, wherever you are.
So with the business part too, also, I think it's the 12th and 13th, we're gonna have the sidewalk, business sidewalks that I know Mr. D'Ambra. We didn't get it on this upcoming weekend because we were trying to get the punch cards out, and Lori's done an amazing job, just put in a lot of energy, but we think we got that 12th and 13th, we're starting.
Yeah, I think that'll be a good weekend, and it's a little closer
That's
to
great.
Christmas. and
Yeah, that's-
right in the
that-
middle of this shopping season, so.
Great idea.
I think that works.
Okay,
Mr. Bradford did have one more
I have a
question.
quick logistical question. Where is for the rec center, where is the construction laydown area going to be?
lay down area.
Where-
Mr. Allen, I
There's-
know what you mean.
I don't have the answer to it
Staging.
right now, but I can get you an answer. When I do get that, I'll let you know. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
They were when I talked to them, they were very concerned about fitting the trailers in and the laydown area, and they said they were still in the works with all that stuff. So, because we were originally talking about having maybe like 2 trailers out there to put our rec staff in, and they were like, I don't know if there's enough room. So I'll get you an answer for that.
Staging. May I have a motion to
I have one
adjourn?
last thing, and
Okay.
you're gonna love it. Happy birthday. I promise not to sing.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, I think we,
I didn't promise to sing.
No, we need no singing is
May have
necessary.
many, many more.
should we make a motion?
Thank you. To motion to sing.
Not to
No,
sing,
I'll
or to
make a
sing?
motion to adjourn. How's that?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And I'm not supposed to motion, but I don't even have to on a workshop. I can just adjourn the meeting. I don't need a, so I have. Thank you. That's sweet.
Birthdays are important.
Ah, you're sweet. Not when you get to my birthdays. They're like, let's just skip by this one. Let's go. It's